Hello and welcome everyone, it is me, Levo, also supported was back for you with another video, and we're starting this one where we began the last one. I've asked you lovely people if you wanted to maybe see a couple of the NNR replays I had left over, and a fairly overwhelming amount of you said yes, so I am happy to deliver because this event was a lot of fun. So, just getting to, see these games again is pretty darn cool. Because in actuality, I just got to, enjoy like a cool format with my favorite deck and like a, tempo and style of gameplay that I do quite enjoy a good bit more than the usual, high-end, high-ceiling combo deck. We're playing here against the Flip Fiend Loner deck, I would say. Getting a very juicy Torrential here on that second flip of the, Terrifying Toddler. Which is kind of, as I've mentioned in the initial video on the NNR event, Morphtronic deck, kind of what this deck wants to do. You want to, get some big tempo swings in off of, cards like Torrential Tribute. Or use, just your generally good back row, like the Wing Blasts, the Book of Moons that are in this list. In that deck profile, just suggested Econ is like another semi, offensive alternative to that you could be playing to, get slowly will your opponent's advantage down while just retaining a decent bit of board presence, either through your extra deck pieces. Since most of the things like, the Virus Swordsman that's currently hitting the field in this format are fairly sticky to, get those off of the field isn't too easy. Opponent tribute summons here a Queen Examiner, runs into the Virus Swordsman. I'm very, fine with that, realistically speaking, because the Virus Swordsman will at least return once, which is kind of the cool thing about NNR, you're making these payoffs that are, decently statted, for, what you're putting into them, but it's not like you're making the crazy things that, usual endboard pieces tend to be nowadays. Run into an absolutely horrendous Sinful Spoils Awakening here, after putting, a Gadget Box token on the field, and all that. Take, another Queen Azamina attack here, and the two Soul Scissors. Not firing the Phoenix Wind Blast, mainly to, just retain that for like a more opportune moment. Opponent links off into Dispatch Parazzi here, probably, just wants to get those Soul Scissors in the graveyard. I believe this is a fresh set that I was MSTing here. MST another set because I think I am, just gearing up for a push here. A lot of these assumptions are based on, vibes. It's been a minute since even I've lived through these memories. So do excuse that. Using the Gadget Box token and the Remoten that I, normal tiered to make a Merry Malphys. A neat piece of removal. The deck has access to an NNR. Does get, unfortunately, blanked by the Talons of Shurlane here. So that the Queen Examiner can, just dodge out of the way of that. But that's kind of, one of the things this deck, that makes this deck, sort of interesting. And you do have, a decent bit of, level 4 Synchros as a selection. I'm currently noticing this extra deck is way out of date. But we're gonna take a look at the list later. If you want some more in-depth thoughts on the deck, though, I would recommend checking out the initial video on NNR that I did. Summoning back here off of a absolutely sacked off the top, I believe, Morphtronic Repair unit. Vacuumin, which was an incredible card. Helped immensely in, this deck being sort of good at, taking apart opponent's setups on the follow-up. Where you would just, use, removal off of Vacuumin and Slingin to kind of clear what your opponent was doing, or, the things that you couldn't get rid of with your back row. To, try and simplify the game state down even further while, keeping sticky endboard pieces like, a Pit Knight early, or the previously mentioned, now banished, Codebreaker Virus Swordsman handy to kind of, take the game home from there. Remoten here banishes a Vacuumin, adds a copy of Telephone, which is, of course, a great card to have on a follow-up, especially if a Vacuumin and Grave that immediately, you know, translates into you getting, you know, a telephone on the board, summoning back the vacuum, and getting, you know, a potential suck, similar to, you know, a card like Relinquish there. And then, you know, turning those two into like a, you know, link to like the early or the Virus Swordsman, which was pretty cool. You know, since I've kind of, you know, taken a liking to like the slower, maybe slightly lower ceiling approaches in deck building. So yeah, this was a great bit of fun. Gadget box token makes its way onto the field here, because I need that non-tuner. Making an old entity Hastoy here, getting in some damage. Noticing currently, you know, with turn 19, I should really keep a tabs on the time here. But I think we'll be maybe kicking it into overdrive for like a couple of the next ones. But I assume this one is going to be done fairly soon. And as I say that, the opponent picks up their cards, and I guess we're moving into the next replay. Hitting definitely the speed up button for this one. 15 turns is quite a bit. Was a bit self-indulgent on that first one, because, you know, Torrential felt pretty good. And also, you know, just get to talk about NNR, just great format, to be honest. Opponent is on something I played in the initial NNR run, which does make this sort of poetic. Probably like the giant ballpark insect deck. Now, of course, also reinforced by like a lot of, you know, the B-Trooper cards, you know, the Scale Bomber. And just like every good replay for this deck, it starts with an absolutely just incredible Torrential that puts my opponent in a very sticky situation. Opponent goes, you know, ball game here, reviving one of the bees. I do decide I would like to keep this telephone around, since it does do fairly well on the follow-up here, since, you know, I do have a staple in hand, and at worst, you know, we're getting the Radion back. If this telephone hits, which it doesn't, unfortunate. Pick up the Gadget Box token here, normal summon the Scopen, making a Crystron Amatrix here, punching over the Scale Bomber, because that's the one that doesn't float. I frankly do not know why this Gadget Box token is an attack. I'd have to, you know, discuss that with past me. And all actuality, opponent does, like, it looks weird, but sort of correctly identifies Gadget Box as like a sort of annoying card for the format. Especially seeing as I am top decking into a tuner here. Since that would mean that I could, you know, of course, immediately put a very, very quick stop to a lot of the things my opponent will be doing. Making a Pit Knight early here, not because it's, you know, particularly great, but because I want to get the Parasite Paranoid off of that, you know, Amatrix as fast as possible without my opponent having like a big bug in their hand that could, you know, jump out and probably end the game. And, you know, early, as she does return in the end phase, which is pretty darn neat. Passing back here, again, just kind of waiting for, you know, an opportunity to present itself. The Goki Pole is, you know, crashed here to get like a Shiny Black Sea Squad out of the deck. Punching with, you know, all of the bugs they have on their field, but in the end phase, the early once again returns. And I basically just need a Morphtronic that like has, in fact, I could be activating here. And I'm put in a situation where I kind of have to make a move. Make a Triple Burst Dragon, incredible card in this format. As you can see, immediately takes out the very bothersome Infinite Ad Lion. If you've played like any semblance of a limited format, you will know that that is a menace. Opponent overlays for a Black Ship of Corn, forgetting to read the card, I believe. Not, you know, getting onto the fact that that thing is only removal if the opponent is small. Opponent's monster is smaller than itself. And Triple Burst Dragon negating the second monster here, which just kind of goes to show in a format that's like primarily dominated by, you know, a lot of like I guess older style card effects. You know, a couple of floaters here and there, some, you know, value things that just give you recruitment once, you know, they get flipped or something. Kind of like Triple Burst, pretty good into that. But yeah, with that finished, we're moving into another game against that silly Flip Fiend Illusion deck. Well, we're getting into a game where the opener It's an opener, alright. Setting an MST and a Phoenix Wing Wind Blast here, kinda daring my opponent to come at me. I don't feel like blind MSTing into like 2 back row. Admittedly doesn't seem like the greatest thing in the universe. And I kinda just wanna dare my opponent to, you know, come at me. Hitting the speed up button here real quick. I do see a decent opportunity for a push here. That is why we are going to MST the back row. Phoenix Wing Blast the other, normal a Remoten, normal the Vacuumin, and putting those two into an old entity Hastor before running into a Moko. Another like fairly annoying card, I'd say, for like limited standards. A flip, essentially, you know, draw one. That's also indestructible by battle and gets to flip itself face down, similar to, you know, the Pac-Man pieces for, you know, the people that are maybe old enough to, you know, remember what that means in Yu-Gi-Oh! Which does provide like a good bit of advantage over, you know, the course of like a fairly long drawn-out game, especially if you do not necessarily find the answers to it. As you can see me do right now, I'm kind of just sitting on this Hastor, twiddling my thumbs, and asking myself what the fuck I'm even doing here. As this Zamanar Solar Sichthion hits the board, Hastor wants to, you know, freeze that thing in place, but my opponent has a Sinful Spoil Susurrus to dodge that bit of removal there, as a Telephone hits the board, giving me access to a Morphtronic Remoten, which is able to grab me another copy of Vacuumin, as I make a Pit Knight early before pitching a Vacuumin here for the Telephone, because if my opponent were to chain the Talons of Shuralane here, I would get to, you know, lock that down with a Pit Knight early, and still get, you know, the suck off of, you know, Vacuumin off here, before, you know, a triple Burst Dragon runs into the Moko, negates the draw effect and also pierces through that. Opponent switches that back, draws a card, attempts to, you know, make something happen here, go into Barber. Add stop target's card, monster card point bank. Not like a particularly great card, admittedly, but, you know, whatever does, you know, the thing. Opponent quick effect fusions into a Solar Sichthion. Does feel like, you know, that triple Burst Dragon is kind of annoying. It handily enough gives me an opportunity to trigger the second effect here of the Vacuumin as well, which, you know, you usually need a turn for. Sometimes Vacuumin isn't, you know, just removal, but I think that's a rare pleasure to have, especially since, you know, getting final attack orders flipped on you is not the most common thing, I think is fair to assume here. Remoten hitting the board here, summoning back a Staplen, making an Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon, of course, like another very good card to help you, you know, combat all those annoying battle phase flip or float effects. Blanking, you know, a terrifying Toddler of Torment here, which is pretty neat. But with all that being said, we move into the final replay I have for you guys today. Against Cosmo, I believe, if I've seen that correctly. So that's going to be a pretty fun one. This one says 9 turns. Am I self-indulgent enough to let the whole thing run on non-speed up? I believe I don't, because I still want to get some time in to, you know, be talking about the deck list here. MSTing here the back row just to get it off the field. Because I have a, you know, second one of my own and a Torrential Tribute. And as I think a couple of you are probably very familiar with the Cosmo cards, so, you know, this is going to be like a very floaty game of Yu-Gi-Oh! The big ships grab you, the pilots, and the pilots immediately get you back to the big ships. As another Cosmojo falls victim to the Mystical Space Typhoon, yeah, who would win, Ancient Jedi Arts or, you know, a silly staple from 2003. Summoning Remoten here, getting a Vacuumin into my grips just so I have a clean out for the Cosmo Landwalker, because I know if my opponent can't get like another guy on the field, or, you know, as one does, I top deck into a repair unit, I have a fairly clean out to this Landwalker here. As I junk box back the level 3 tuner in the Remoten here, to immediately make a level 4 Synchro and Old Entity Hastor. The list usually runs like another 4-star Synchro and Underworld Fighter Balmung. That's like another option you have here, but I think in the event I was just on the Hastor. So that is what I went with here. Not putting the Scorpion on the board, just, not trying to overextend. Want to keep as much resources as possible, but it seems my opponent has run out of, pilots to put in their ships and is picking up their cards. But with that, let's take a quick look at the deck list before I send you guys off. Remember to swap scenes. But yeah, this is a recreation based on, the initial video I did. Oh god. Still not entirely over that cold I had a couple weeks back. But yeah, this is a recreation of the list I played in the very, 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 sadly very short-lived event. It's, as sort of explained in the games, just a fairly simple Morphtronic list. It's NNR, so you don't get all the fancy spammy boys, the cell phones, the smartphones, the gadget gamers. None of that's legal. And if it comes to, synchros and links and general extra deck pieces, you will have to settle for a bit less than, certain cards that are still Master Duel legal. Stuff like Apollo, Baron, and the works. But overall, realistically very fun. Mainly because I personally do, enjoy, mid-rangey control decks. A lot more to, the high-end combo decks. So, getting to enjoy that flavor of deck with, my favorite archetype in the game was pretty cool, admittedly. So that's been like a real highlight. And also, as someone who's been playing for quite a while, it's just cool to flip like a torrential for 3, I think that's something a lot of you probably also can agree on. So yeah, list is just on 3 Vacuuman, 3 Telephone, 3 Remoten, 3 Scopen, 3 Radion, 3 Slingen, 3 Junk Box, 3 Repair Unit, 3 Gadget Box, 3 Space Typhoon, 3 Book of Moon, 3 Torrential Tribute, and 3 Wing Blast. And last card is a Singleton Lost Wind, which is limited in NNR, or was limited in the event. But that's probably like a good Singleton to round out a deck that's, otherwise fairly straightforward. As mentioned, trying to, keep things low to the ground with, some of like your defensive back row. Remove stuff from the board on the following turns with, Vacuumans that you can, keep getting back out of the graveyard off of, stuff like Telephone or the multitude of revival spells. Sometimes, getting to spam a token each turn is pretty good to keep yourself alive, even if it just, chump blocks an attack. And the rest of the deck is just like, I guess, the best Morphtronic names you could be playing in this environment. Extra deck, yeah. A couple of force, Mary Murphy's for removal, Hastor and Balmung are just sticky guys. Amatrix is basically a beat stick. Charge Warrior is a decent bit of, just draw power. Vylon Delta was very cute because realistically you can make this off of a Radion with like Scopen or Remoten, and in the end phase it does get to add you a Repair Unit, which is pretty cool. Meteor Burst, just a battle phase blanky boy, similar to, the Triple Burst Dragon. Zeta is like a decent end board piece for NNR purposes. Enlightenment Paladin is just a big 8. The 8 pool's not that deep, and this was the one I felt like the most confident jamming. These 2 XZs have never come up. But, for more detailed, I guess, input, do refer to the original deck profile. If NNR Morphtronics really fascinate you that much. This is a fairly popular community format, so that's maybe something you could even take to, like, third-party events. Or just, have something handy for the next time this event rolls around. But, yeah, with all that being said, that's kind of where I will probably be wrapping things up. It felt good to, look at these games again. NNR is just a very, very, very fun format to me. Especially when I get to enjoy, my favorite archetype in, my favorite flavor of deck. But, yeah, with all that being said, I'll be thanking you very much for watching, and also just, like, you all for, letting me be this self-indulgent and talk about NNR again. It's an absolute pleasure to, get to do this. But, yeah, with that out of the way, thanking you very much for watching. I'll be seeing you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.